Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Lamed Chet. Today's daf is sponsored by Rochelle Chefetz in loving memory of her father, Shragai Cohen, Shraga Feivel ben Avraham ben Sion on his 20th year at site, and for maternal grandparents, Rav Moshe on the 4th of Kislev and Tzipora Mashbam on the 23rd of Kislev. They are greatly missed. Today's daf is sponsored by Kyle Robinson in gratitude for the loving support she's received from Hadran and its students during her illness. So many of her fellow students have been in contact and brought comfort and strength to Carol during this challenging time. Okay, we're going to get started with our daf. Just a quick review of the end of yesterday's daf. We got off on this tangent about whether or not certain things, right? We got into this thing of pisuk tamim. We had this machloket about what the money that the teacher was getting paid, that there are teachers who could get paid for teaching Torah. Was it because of pisuk tamim, or was it because of babysitting? So if you say pisuk tamim, if you say babysitting, why didn't Rav say pisuk tamim like Rabbi Yochanan did? And the answer is because he thought pisuk tamim was from the Torah. And again, not exactly from the Torah, but a very old tradition that gave it status almost of a d'oraita. Okay, as we said, halacha l'Moshe Sinai is kind of in between d'oraita to Rabbanan. It's kind of a very old tradition, not exactly from the Torah, but close enough that this would put it in a different category. And then you wouldn't be able to say, right? You wouldn't be able to say pisuk tamim you can get paid for because that's really part and parcel Torah. And then we brought a pasuk from Nehemiah where we saw that the way they read the Torah, right? All those things were references to different elements, and one of them was Yavinu b'mikra is pisuk tamim, and that shows that this was a tradition from a very old tradition. And then we had these other things about Mikra Sofrim, Itur Sofrim, Kri v'lo Ktiv, Ktiv v'lo Kri. Also, all those are traditions of Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now, one of the things we saw in the first Rasha was the Psukim. What are the Psukim? It means how you divide the Psukim. Just like the Gemara has no punctuation, right? It doesn't have periods, commas, neither does the Torah. How do we know when it's the end of a Pasuk? So that also is a very ancient tradition, to which we're going to see now that sometimes when these things are traditions, there's debates about them. So there's one pasuk starting from the third line in our daf, Lamed Chet, Amar Rav Acha bar Ada, b'ma'arava paskin lahadim psuka letalta psukim. In Israel, they actually split this pasuk that in Babylonian, our tradition, and it's actually, our tradition is one pasuk. They take this pasuk, okay, it's a pasuk, let me just get to the whole pasuk, okay, because the Gemara doesn't quote the whole thing. Shmot Yutet, pasuk Tet. Shmuel chapter 19, pasuk 9. Vayomer Hashem Moshe, right? We're at Matan Torah, the receiving of the Torah. Hinei anochi ba elecha ba'av ha'anan, coming to you in a cloud. Ba'avur yishma ha'am b'dabri ma'ach, v'gam b'cha ya'aminu la'olam, so that the nation will hear and they'll trust in you. Vayaged Moshe divrei ha'am el Hashem. And then Moshe told what God said. Moshe told what the people said to Hashem. This is what you would call in English class a long run-on sentence, right? And therefore, in Israel, they split it into three separate psukim because there's three different ideas going on in this pasuk, whereas in Babylonia, they read it all as one pasuk. Amar Rabbi Chama b'Rabbi Chanina. Now going back to this whole idea about getting paid or not getting paid for teaching Torah. If you haven't listened to Gefet again, strongly recommended. Rabbi Chama b'Rabbi Chanina says, Lo ha'eshir Moshe ela mipsaltan shalucha. Well, if Moshe didn't get wealthy from teaching Torah, which was his main job, right, or leading the Jewish people, so where did he get wealthy from? Now we're going to see that it was clear he was wealthy. See how they prove that, although the truth is they're going to end up proving it from this pasuk eventually. But Moshe was wealthy. Where did he get his wealth from? Elami psaltan shaluchot, from the psolet of the luchot. When Moshe basically engraves the luchot, right? God tells him, Psol lechashni luchot avanim karishonim. The second luchot he's supposed to do, right, to kind of carve them out himself. So all the carvings were very valuable, right? And he took that and made money off of it. Right. My father-in-law was telling me he was in the jewelry business. So they used to collect, the gold pieces, the teeny little pieces, and you could make up, right? You could basically, if you clean the floors and kept the stuff that you cleaned the floors with, that was all worth something. So it's the same idea here, that he took the psolet of the luchot, that was God's gift to him, and from there he made his wealth. So now, where do they get it from? Because it says psol lecha. It doesn't say, normally, what would it say? Psol shnei luchot avanim. That's the command. go carve them out. But instead it says psol lecha, to you. That means you get to keep the psolet. It's a play on words here. Psol means like a pesel, make the pesel. But it also is psolet, which is the garbage from it, the what you don't need. So we took that, psaltan shalcha yehe, they go to you. We're going to see this drasha a bunch of times. It's going to be quoted today a few times in the context of our daf. Amar Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina. Now we're talking all sorts of other things about Moshe. Since we got to psol lecha, we're now going to do a drasha on the words ktov lecha. Very fascinating, shocking line. Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina says, Lo nitna Torah ela leMoshe u'lezaro. The Torah, shockingly, okay, believe it or not, according to Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina, you think the Torah was given to all of us? It was not. It was given to Moshe and his children. Shenema, how do you know this? Because it says ktov lecha, and it says psol lecha. Ma psaltan, okay, this pasuk is Vayomer Hashem Moshe, ktov lecha et hadvarim ha'elu, ki al pi hadvarim ha'elu karati itcha Brit ve'et Yisrael. It's actually a very strange pasuk to use this as proof, because it says, write this down, and then it says, because on these things I've made a covenant with you and with the Jewish people. So it seems a little weird because it does seem to include everybody, but Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina focuses on the words ktov lecha, and he says, just like psol lecha was for Moshe, it wasn't for everybody else. Ktov lecha, again, it should have just said ktov. So, ma psaltan shalcha, af ktavan shalcha. But Moshe nahag b'tovat ayin. Moshe said, I'm going to be, kind of nice about this, generous with this. Unitana Yisrael. And he gave it to the Jews. Ba'alav katuv omer, tov ayin hu yivorach. Someone who has a generous eye will be blessed. And that's a reference to Moshe. It's pasuk in Mishlei and Proverbs. And that's a reference to Moshe, that he went out of his way to give the Torah anyway to the Jewish people. There's a big debate about what this means. What do you mean? The Torah was given to the Jews at Sinai. How could he possibly say the Torah wasn't given to the Jews? So some people try to make distinctions. Some people think this actually means the Torah, and Moshe was the one who decided, let's give it to the Jews. Some people say, no, the Torah was clearly given to everybody. What it means here is that the explanation of the mitzvot wasn't given all at once. And to teach the logic behind everything and the details, that Moshe was just going to tell them as they got to each thing. And that what Moshe then realized is, I should really do it right at the beginning and teach everybody everything. So there's a bit of a debate about exactly what this means, how far we take this statement, and I would say how seriously we take it. Does he really mean the Torah wasn't given to the Jews? Right? It's a little bit strange. Well, in any case, the Gemara is going to have difficulty with this. Rav Chisda is going to start throwing psukim at Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina and say, how could you possibly have said this? Mativ Rav Chisda. Okay, now it's the Gemara answering for him. They weren't living at the same time. Mativ Rav Chisda v'otitzi v'Hashem ba'etahi l'lamed. It's also Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina is from Israel. Rav Chisda is from Babel. Anyway, he throws up this pasuk. It says, "Otitzi v'Hashem ba'etahi l'lamed etchem." God commanded me at that moment to teach you. This is Moshe saying, I was commanded to teach you. So what do you mean? Otitziva v'ani lachem. No, read it as, God commanded me, and I decided to teach it to you. Next question of Rav Chisda, Re'eh limadeti etchem. See, I taught you chukim u'mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem lokai. I taught you chukim u'mishpatim as God commanded me, which sounds like I taught you. This is a good grammar lesson, right? What is that God commanded me referring to? I taught you because God commanded me, or otitziva v'ani lachem. God commanded me these chukim u'mishpatim, and I decided to teach them to you. V'ata kitvu lachem. Third question. Kitvu lachem et hashira hazot. And now you write for yourselves this shira. This is Parshat Ha'azinu. So now it says kitvu lachem. This isn't kitov lecha. This is for them. Shira lechuda. No, the shira is different. If you want to learn more about shira and the Torah being shira and all that, in Hebrew we have Yafi Clymer, we have a Shiur that's on our site in her new column of all about shira and the Torah being shira and what this means. Anyway, it says kitvu lachem et shira hazot. So they say shira lechuda, right? Shira is something different. So now we have categories. According to Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Chanina, the whole of Torah was given to Moshe. He decided to give it to the Jews. But except for the shira. Shirat Ha'azinu was given to them, to which the Gemara says, What do you mean? It says about the Shirah, Leman tiyeh li hashirah azot le'ed b'bnei Israel. This will stand as testimonial. Testimonial of what? So, question why this is a question, but debate among the commentaries, but let's explain it like this. The Shirah is a testimonial to what? What is the Shirah all about? If you keep the mitzvot, it will be good for you. If you don't keep the mitzvot, you'll get punished. Which means that the Shirah itself references the entire Torah. You can't say they got the Shirah without the Torah. The Shirah is a testimonial to the entire Torah. So they end up putting Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina into narrowing the focus of what he really meant. Ela pilpula ba'alma. What was Moshe given that he didn't give to that he decided that it was just for him, but he decided to give it to everyone else, is the learning of the Torah. Okay, what we're doing every day, right? The Gemara part, the pilpul, the deliberation, the understanding behind it, the thinking about it. That, in other words, the Torah itself, the mitzvah, were given to the people. But the learning of it and all that were not given to them. So now this is a little bit tricky if you go with explanation number 2, because that was saying the learning part of it. So what they mean here is that there's kind of, according to that explanation, you have to say there's different levels. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina was saying what Moshe got alone, what Moshe got for everyone was the mitzvot. Whether he was going to explain them at the time or not, that already was something he decided to do, which is I'll explain it all to you before. That's explanation. But pilpul is kind of a much higher level of learning, which actually isn't really for everybody, right? These are things where, if you give it to everybody, maybe they won't understand it, they'll misconstrue, and that's for special individuals. That's what Moshe decided he was going to pass on, the gift of the real serious learning of Torah. And that's maybe another possible way of reading it. Again, it's a hard sugya to understand really what the simple reading of Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Chanina is. Does he really think that in some world, the Jews weren't really expected all to get the Torah and only Moshe? Actually reminds us a little bit of after Chid Ha'ego, when God wants to create a whole nation just for Moshe and destroy everybody else. But it's strange if we understand it on a simple level. Amal Rabbi Yochanan. We're going back to Moshe and how great Moshe was. So now, in order to get Shchayat Shechina on you, which, good question, what exactly that means. So the commentaries say we're not talking about any kind of Hashchayat Shechina, because that happened on Har Sinai to everybody. It happened, you can't say to unique people when it happened to everyone, or Bilam, for example, got Shechina, he had prophecy. So we don't just mean regular prophecy. What we mean is continual, everyday, daily prophecy, or all, very, maybe not every day, but very often, communication with God. You have to have the following 4 traits. Gibor, Ashil, Chacham, Ve'anav. You need to be physically strong, wealthy, wise, and humble. V'kulan mi-Moshe, and you learn these all from Moshe. So now we have to go one by one. Say, how did we learn the following things from Moshe? Gibor, dichtiv, vayifros et ha'oel al mishkan. It says Moshe put the oil himself over the tabernacle. Okay, why does that show he was strong? Well, Amar Mal, Moshe Rabbeinu praso. So first of all, it says vayifros et ha'oel. They say it was Moshe. Uchtiv 10 ramot orech hakeresh. Well, the beams were 10 cubits high. That's very tall, which means if he was able to put the oil on top, we're assuming he didn't have a ladder, he must have been very tall. If you're tall, you must be strong. Well, maybe not, to which the Gemara said, you could be very tall, but not strong. Like height doesn't necessarily mean physical strength. Okay, so forget that pasuk. Let's learn it from this pasuk. Ve'et post, back to the luchot, the tablets that we were discussing. Ve'et post b'shnei haluchot, right? Moshe is grabbing the 2 luchot. Va'ashlichem, and he throws them. Seemingly took a lot of strength to actually, right? There's a debate about whether he threw them or he dropped them, right? If you drop them, maybe it doesn't take strength, but to throw them takes strength. So it says, Va'ashlichem, I threw them down, me'al shtei adai, from my 2 hands, va'ashabrem, and I broke them. Now, how do we know the luchot were big? Well, it says in a Braita, V'tanya haluchot or kan shisha v'rochban shiva. They were 6 cubits in length, 6 cubits in width, v'ovyan shlosha, and they were 3 tfachim, 3 handbreadths wide. Did I say? There should have been handbreadths the whole time. I don't know what I said, but tfachim, handbreadths. So now, they were 6 by 6 by 3, and they were, the other thing is in another source, it says they were made of like a heavy material. So because of that, more heavy, basically they were very heavy, and therefore it must be that he was strong. So from there we get the strength of Moshe. Ashir, wealthy, how do we know? That's from the pasuk we saw already. Psolacha, psaltan yehe, shalcha yehe. Chacham. How do we know Moshe was wise? Got to imagine Moshe was wise, but okay, how do we know this? Rav Shmuel, Damrei Travayu, they both said, Chamishim Sha'arei Bina Nivu'u Ba'olam. There were 5 gates of understanding, Bina, in the world. B'kulam nitnu Moshe chaser echad. He got all of them other than one. Okay, again, what this means, it's a whole other discussion, how exactly you understand this, but we're going to go with the simple reading here. Shene'emar, V'tachserehu me'at me'elohim. In Sefer Tehillim, and there's a parak in Tehillim where it's talking, the understanding is it's the angels discussing Moshe in the heavens when Moshe went up to Har Sinai. And they said, V'tachserehu me'at me'elohim. He was missing a little bit of God. In other words, he came close to the level of God, but was missing a little bit. So they say that's a reference to the fact that he got 49 out of the 50. Anav, how do we know he's humble? D'chtiv ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od. Okay, so from there you see these 4 characteristics were in Moshe. From there we learn if you want to be like Moshe and have God speak to you on a regular basis, you need to have the following four qualities. Doesn't mean if you have those qualities, God's going to speak to you every day. You know, we don't even have prophecy anymore, but it's showing what it takes to have God speak to you. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kol ha'neviim ashirim hayu. Okay, all the prophets were wealthy. Someone at the end of the Hebrew Zoom asked, and maybe I'll tell you the answer that I gave her when we finished this little section, which is, why would it be important for a prophet to be wealthy, right? So let's read and then we'll see. I think that there's some hints and allusions to why it's important in the following answers they bring. Well, if you haven't noticed, we've had a bunch of places where they bring one pasuk and then they reject it and bring a different one in instead. So here we're going to see the same thing, and maybe think about the one that they rejected. You have to wonder why they start with the one that they were going to reject. You could have just ignored that one and just brought one. I mean, obviously, we've been learning Gemara for a long time. We know it's the style of the Gemara, but often they might bring one in order to bring about some other idea, even though in the end they're going to reject it. That's what I explained to her in my answer to her. Anyway, we'll talk about it soon. So how do we know you have to be wealthy? Well, we're going to learn it from 4 prophets. Mi Moshe, mi Shmuel, mi Amos, mi Yona. Moshe, dichtiv. How do we know Moshe was wealthy? So in the end, we're going to get back to the answer we keep giving. Okay, this is, and now you see why they're bringing this, because it's all sugyot that talk about Moshe and the psolacha and how he became wealthy from the psolet, from the remains of the luchot when they were created. But first, they're going to try a different proof. Dichtiv lo chamor echad mehem nasati. Moshe says, I didn't take even one donkey from you. Okay, this is in the Korach story, right? He says, well, why bother me, right? Did I take anything from you? So now, what are we talking about? I didn't take any donkeys from you. Ibelo agra, if he's saying I didn't take a donkey and use it without paying you, what Moshe's trying to say, I didn't steal from you? No, he said, like, that's obvious he didn't steal. That's not teaching you anything new. He wouldn't be coming to say that. So what it means is, Ela da'afilu ba'agra. Even I didn't ever even rent a donkey from you. Now, why wouldn't you rent a donkey? Because you have your own donkey. He was wealthy. He didn't need anyone else's donkey. And what he was trying to say is, you know, not only did I not steal from you, I never took anything from you, even for pay. So the assumption of the Gemara is, why didn't he need to do it for pay? Because he had his own money. He had his own donkey, to which the Gemara says, that's not why you don't rent things. It's one of the reasons, but there's another reason why you wouldn't rent something. Maybe he was so poor, he couldn't afford to rent a donkey. So we can't learn it from there. So we learned it again from that drasha about the luchot, the tablets. Shmuel, we're going to have the same idea here. Dichtiv, hineni anu bi neged Hashem v'neged Mashicho. Like the people were going against me. And he says, it's shor milakachti, v'chamor milakachti. What did I? This is when they want a king. And he's like, why are you rebelling against me by asking for a king? It's like, what's wrong with me? Did I take any animals from you, right? I didn't take your oxen. I didn't take your donkey. What he's trying to reference is, right, wait till the king comes and he starts taking all your stuff. So again, same question. What does he mean I didn't take from you? If he took without paying, what he's trying to say, I'm not a robber. He's saying, even I never even rented from you. But just like we said before, maybe he was poor, and that's why he never rented from them. He didn't have the money to rent. So they bring a different pasuk. Talks about Shmuel, how he would go from place to place to judge the people, as opposed to making everybody come to him. He went from city to city. And then it said, and then he would go home to the Ramah, because there is his house. Now, you didn't need to tell us there was his house. Shmuel, first of all, is called Shmuel HaRamati. It was from the Ramah. Everybody knows that was his house. So why does it say Kisham Beito? To teach you, Amarava, Kol Makom Sha'alach Beito Imo. Wherever he would go with his house. In other words, he set up shop there. He had a whole house. He obviously had wealth. Otherwise, you just live in your tent if you couldn't afford. Right? He went to a fancy hotel every time he was there, like that kind of thing. Obviously, that wasn't one. But the point is, he set up a house in each place, and that's Sham Beito is not a reference to the Ramah. The reference is to all the places he was at that were mentioned in the previous Pesukim. Amarav, Gadol Mashanamar b'Shmuel yoter Mashanamar b'Moshe. What Shmuel said was even more than Moshe. He went even one step farther. If we go back to the Pesukim where we compared the two, forget about the Pesukim that were used as proof in the end, but the Pesukim where they each said, I didn't take anything from you, there's a difference. By Moshe, it says, Lo chamorcha mehem nasati, afilu b'sachar. Right? Even if I paid. Now, the assumption is, we didn't understand this before, but that they're saying, what Moshe is saying is, I didn't rent from you against your will. Like, let's say you don't want to rent me your donkey, but I give you money anyway and insist on taking the donkey. That I didn't do, okay? But if there was someone who wanted to rent me their donkey, then I did that. Whereas Shmuel, even beratzon, even if you wanted to rent it to me, I wouldn't do it. How do we know this? Dichtiv vayomru lo ashaktanu v'lo ratzotanu. You didn't oppress us and you didn't ratzotanu. What do we mean by ratzotanu? Even beratzon. You didn't even take our stuff with our consent. Amos. What about Amos? Dichtiv. Vayan Amos vayomer al Amatzia. Now Amatzia was accusing him and saying, what kind of a Navi? There were all these false prophets, and the false prophets would make money off of prophesizing. They would take money from people. They would say, oh, pay me, and I'll give you a prophecy. It was a profession almost, okay? Not a very good profession, but maybe it was lucrative, but it wasn't the right way to go about making a living. But people would make up prophecies and take money for them. Okay, we know with Bilam, right? He was hired to give a prophecy. Here wasn't a false prophecy, but they would hire prophets. So Amatzia comes to Amos and says, what are you, a false prophet? You're trying to make money off of this? To which Amos says, Lo navi anochi v'lo ben navi anochi. I'm not a prophet like you think, and I'm not the son of a prophet, of these false prophets. Ki boker anochi uboles shikmim. Okay, so I am a boker and I have sycamores. So what's a boker? Can you target Rav Yosef? Are mare geti ana. This doesn't really help us. Hebrew is actually easier for us to understand. Boker from lashon of bakal, cattle. Okay, but the Targum doesn't really help us. What he's saying is, I have a lot of cattle and sheep, right? I have a lot of animals I own, and I have sycamores in the shvela, right? I forget how you translate the shvela, help me, but anyway, I'm a wealthy person. I'm not doing this for the money. Okay, that's not why I'm a prophet here. Yona, dichtiv. So Yona, okay, coastal plains, lowlands, thank you, right, lowlands, that's what I was thinking, Shefel, could think of the word. Okay, Yona dichtiv. What about Yona? This is a funny story, I think. When he goes on the boat, it says he gave it says okay, her wages. Now, her is the boat's wages. So what do they learn from this? Rabbi Yochanan, he paid for the entire boat. Why would he pay for the entire boat? Well, what happens when you get on a boat and you're in a rush? You have to wait for the boat to fill up. The guy won't leave until the boat is full and he gets all his money. So Yona said, I'm going to pay for the entire boat, and that way we can leave right now. Okay, that's how desperate he was to get moving. Okay, and then Rabbi Romanus, the amount it cost for a boat, Rabbi Romanus says, was 4,000 golden dinarim. So that means he must have been wealthy to be able to afford that. But Rabbi Yochanan, okay, so that's our statement about those. Last line, and then we'll go back and explain maybe why this thing about the wealth that someone asked me about. Rabbi Yochanan, If we go back to Moshe and his learning Torah, in the beginning he used to learn Torah and he would forget it. And when he went up to the mountain, 40 days, 40 nights, you can imagine he would forget it. He had to learn the entire Torah in 40 days, 40 nights. Try doing that and try remembering everything, right? That's not so easy. Until God gave it to him as a gift, and then he remembered it. Says after he finished speaking with him, he gave it to Moshe. Gave, not nitina, as lashon matana, giving it as a gift. Okay, so many of the commentaries explain here, what does this mean? It means that Moshe worked hard to learn Torah, but it's kind of like a two-step process. You have to do your share, and once you do your share of really toiling in it and trying very hard, even though you're not succeeding necessarily in remembering things. This is good for us as Daf Yomi learners, right? How much do you remember and retain what you want? What you learn, but the idea is that if you put the hard work and effort into it, ultimately God will come and help you out to make it easier for you to remember everything. So kind of, you have to put in your effort and then God will come and help you. Okay, back to this question about wealth. Why is wealth important? So all you need to do is look at modern politics to see why independent wealth is important, because if you're a leader, right, and I think those psukim about each of them saying, Lo chamor chamehem lakachti, I didn't take anything from you, I didn't, right? It's very hard as a leader, right? People claim, oh, you're using public money for your personal things, or, right, that is a big issue. And you want to be a leader who's beyond all that, or like Amos, I don't think I'm doing it for the money, right? I'm not in it for the money. I have my own independent wealth. Then already people are less suspect of you when they think, it doesn't look good that you're trying to use your money for your own advancement, use other people's money for your own advancement or something like that. So anyway, I think and that's possibly why they brought these psukim, even though they rejected them in the end, because those psukim are at the real core of why it's important that someone have their own wealth, so that it doesn't become complicated and the lines are not clear between what money they're using for what. Anyway, obviously a very relevant in modern day politics in all sorts of places, areas, etc. Okay, next, new Mishnah. We're back to Mudal Hana'ah, right? So we have this person who's not allowed to benefit from someone else. What can that person who they're not allowed to benefit from them do anyway? Which is what we're in the middle of a lot of Mishnayot that are saying this. So even if the other person can't benefit from you, you can feed their wife and children, even though you're actually obligated to feed them yourself. First of all, there's a lot of problems here. You might remember from Ketubot that you're actually not obligated to feed your sons. So that's a big question, what the Mishnah says here, even though you're obligated to feed them. Some people say we're talking about children under the age of 6, which you are obligated, although you're only obligated from a takana of Usha. So I don't know if that's strong enough, and I'm not saying I don't know. The commentaries debate this, whether that's what's going on or not. Some people say the chayav is really the wife and not the children. It's just talking about the wife and the children. Now, why are you allowed to do this if the person's in fact obligated? You're allowed to because they call this indirect benefit, because you're not directly benefiting them, you're helping them, right? And this is a question is this only like Hanan, who said you're mavriach ari, right? You're just kind of preventing a loss. Or maybe this is even the rabbis who disagree with him when it comes to the guy who comes in when someone's abroad. That's maybe only when someone's abroad. In this case, this is just a person who wants to give a gift. Well, he comes over and says, I want to give you a gift and give you food for the year for your family. So that is actually not considered a gift to the person, according to this Mishnah, because it's indirect help and it's not direct help. Okay. But you cannot feed their animals. We're going to see why in a minute. Bein tme'ah, bein to'ora, whether they're kosher animals or non-kosher animals. Rabbi Eliezer omer zanet hatme'ah ve'eno zanet ha'to'ora. He distinguishes between kosher and non-kosher. So in a minute, we're going to see why. Amrulo. They said to him, Ma bein tme'ah le'to'ora. Why is there a difference, kosher, non-kosher? Amar lehu. He said to them, Sha'to'ora nafsha l'shamayim begufa shelo. The kosher ones, its soul goes to God, but when it dies, but what happens with its body? It's mine. I slaughter the animal. If you fed my animal a lot, my animal's now fat and it has more meat, like it's more fatty. It's a better, they're always trying to fatten up animals in order to have more meat on them. Utzme'ah, but non-kosher animals we don't eat. So nafsha v'gufa l'shamayim, when they die, I can't benefit from them anyway. So what's the difference if you've managed to fatten my animal up? That's not considered benefit for me. And in fact, some people say, what animals are used for two purposes: work purposes and for eating. So the eating is not relevant here. With the work, what's the issue with the work? Well, if you fatten them up, they actually work less because the fat, right? The more heavy they are, the harder it is for them to work. So it's actually not even good for you if they do that. In other words, again, if you're going to eventually eat the animal, then it's good, but not if you're not. Amrulo, but the rabbis think even non-kosher animals. So why that? It's not true what you said. Even the non-kosher animals, you benefit from them after their death. If you sell it to non-Jews or give it to your dog, it also benefits you. You could sell it for more money. You can't eat the animal, but you're allowed to actually sell it. So therefore, that's why the rabbis think you can't feed the other person's animal, whether they're kosher or non-kosher animals. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Chanina Amar Rav Huna. We're now going to have a halacha that Rav Huna says. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Chanina says in the name of Rav Huna. And the question is going to be again, who's the subject? Who to who? What are we talking about here? All these lines are very complicated. If you can't benefit from your friend, mutar la'asilo bito, you can marry off your daughter to him. So now, who's who in the picture? Who is forbidden to who? Have bar Rabbi Zera. So Rabbi Zera asked, "B'may askina? What's the case here? If it's that the property of the father of the bride was forbidden to the chatan, which is probably what you thought. That would be the way I would read it. Okay. So again, let's say I'm the chatan. Okay. I'm a man. I'm the chatan. The father of the bride marries her off to me. So you're not going to like this next line. He is giving me benefit by giving me his daughter, because his daughter is now going to be like a maidservant to serve me. Okay, let's ignore the lingo here. But what it means is, as if I'm a man and I'm the husband, I'm clearly going to benefit from having a wife. The fact that he gives me his daughter as my wife, that's clearly beneficial to me, right? You don't even necessarily to say shivcha l'shamsho, right? It goes both ways, right? If I'm a female and he gives me his son, right? And it's different giving the son. We'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, it's benefiting me directly. I'm getting benefit from him because he gave me his daughter. Ella, if you want to say the reverse, nichse chatan asurim alavi kala. Okay, so again, the chatan, maybe it's the reverse. His property is forbidden to the father of the bride. Well, it can't be that, because we're assuming that Rav Huna is adding something more than the Mishnah. And it really can be learned from the Mishnah itself. They said even more than that. Now, if this man, assume I'm a man, okay? I'm not married, let's say, to this guy's daughter, and this guy can't benefit from me. What am I allowed to do? I'm allowed to feed his daughter, basically, right? Because what did we learn? Zanit banav and his wife. I can feed his wife, I can feed his sons. Sons obviously includes daughters here. So I can feed them. Now, if he marries his daughter off to me, I'm going to be feeding her, but she's going to be my responsibility to feed. So obviously, in that case, it's going to be permitted to me to do that. So if I can feed her when she's in his reshut, I can obviously feed her when she's in my reshut, in which case it's not considered that I'm benefiting him, because he can't benefit from me. So that can't possibly be, because Rav Huna is basically adding something that's so obvious from the Mishnah is even less than what the Mishnah says. Because the Mishnah said, if she's still his daughter and not married to me, I can feed her. So of course I can feed her when she marries me. So we're going to go back to the first option, where it's the father-in-law's possessions that are forbidden. And how could it be? Well, what's the reason? Right there we said, how could he possibly do it? He's directly causing me benefit. We're talking about a woman who is already of age, right? She's beyond the age of 12 and a half, and she agrees to do it on her own. In other words, it's not that I'm benefiting, again, this is the indirect, right? It's not that I'm benefiting from the father of the bride. I'm benefiting the bride is deciding to marry me on her own. Now, it does say he marries her off, but even if he marries her off, she's the one who decided, yes, I want to get married to him. So therefore, it's not really that the father is causing me direct benefit. It's the woman herself. And that obviously is not connected necessarily with the father. Tanya nami hachi, we can prove this from a bright. So here it says specifically he's not allowed to marry off the daughter unless she's of age and she does it willingly. So that proves that must be what Rav Huna said, which Rav Huna said this halacha, like that Braita said, which is basically you can marry your daughter off to someone, even if they're forbidden to benefit from you, as long as she's older and she does it on her own, and then it's not considered that you caused him benefit. Okay, next line. And this line is going to be understood in two totally different ways. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Hamadil beno l'Talmud Torah. Okay, it's so hard to translate this without translating in one way or another, but this is someone who makes a vow about his son relating to learning Torah. I'll leave it at that, very vague. Okay, I'll now give you the explanation number one. We'll read the study according to explanation number one, and then we'll do explanation number two. Let's say my son's ready to go to yeshiva, and instead of going to yeshiva, decides to go, like in Israel, straight to the army, okay? Or maybe in America, straight to university, right? They're 18 years old, or wherever you might be in the world, okay? They decide they don't want to go to yeshiva, and the father says, no way, no how, you're going to yeshiva. So the father says, I forbid you to benefit from me unless you go learn in yeshiva. So the question is, what did the father mean by that? What did he mean to forbid the son? So the father can still fill up a barrel of water for him, light a candle for him. Rabbi Yitzchak amar litzlot lo dad katan. He can even roast a small fish for him. The point is, he was talking about bigger things, like I'm disowning you, but it doesn't mean I won't give you some water, I won't light a candle for you. Right? These are very easy, small things. The father didn't include that in the vow. A second explanation, which I think is maybe a better explanation here in terms of the Chavit Shamayim and La'alik lo et haner, which you would think is more something the son would do for the father. So now they're going to say, like, out of respect. So Madir b'no l'Talmud Torah, according to option number two, is that the son wants to learn Torah. It's not that the son isn't interested in yeshiva. The son wants to learn Torah, and the father wants to enable the son to learn Torah. So what does the father say? Listen, when you come home from yeshiva on the weekends, don't worry about any household duties, okay? You're basically vowed from helping me. You're not allowed to do anything in the house because I want you to be 100% right. There's a little opposite the way I would do things, right? When you're in yeshiva, you can focus on yeshiva. When you're home, you're part of a household. But this is saying, I want you to be able to be fully focused on yeshiva and learning Torah. I don't want you to do anything in the house. You're forbidden to do tasks in the house. Okay? And then when the son is home, you can fill up a barrel of water. He can light a candle for the father. He can roast him a small fish, because those weren't the big things he was referring to. He was referring to major household duties and not the small things. So two totally different explanations. What's interesting about them, number one, in terms of the son, it's whether he wants to or doesn't want to, but in terms of who's forbidden to who is also flipped here, whether it's the son can't do something for the father or the son can't benefit at all from the father's stuff. It's a different kind of thing. Okay, Rabbi Yitzchak amar Rabbi Yomi amar Rabbi Yochanan, hamudal hana'a mechavero mutar lahashkoto kos shel shalom. If you can't benefit from me, I can still pour you this cup of peace. What on earth is that? Gemara asks, mine you. In fact, we have two approaches. One is the Babylonian, Hachatirgamu, here they translated, and we're going to have B'ma'arava in Israel, they translate it differently. Either Kos Shel Beit HaAvel, okay, there was a cup that they would drink in the house of the mourners. So you're allowed to give him that cup, even if he's not allowed to benefit from you or she's not allowed to benefit from you. And in Israel, they said it's Kos Shel Beit HaMerchatz. So that was in a bathhouse. They would first have a cup of hot water after going in the bath, and then they would have a cup of cold water, and it was considered beneficial for their health. Like, it wasn't healthy if you didn't give that to them. So even if I'm forbidden to give any benefit to you, I could still give you this cup. So the commentaries use the term darkei shalom here because of ways of peace. It would be totally crazy if we're in the house of Avel and I won't give them the cup, right, to drink from. So a debate about whether it's them giving me a cup, like I'm one of the Menachamim who came to the house and they gave everybody a little bit to drink, and maybe because it's so small, also another reason, or also just because it's a custom. And what the point is that when I said, I'm not going to let you benefit from me, I wasn't including things like this. and not things that are for your health, right? So if I'm working in the bathhouse and you're there, I can give you a cup because, right, it would be almost like a slap in your face not to do that. And it's the assumption is that wasn't what I meant. Okay, last thing for today, Mishnah says, right? The rabbi said you can't feed their animal, but what about slaves? Canaanite slaves, which are often, they're in the category, they're not animals, but there are always these categories of things you own, and there's animals you own, property you own, possessions you own, and also you own slaves. Okay, again, as hard as it is for us to understand the concept of owning humans. We understand it, we just don't think that it's a good thing. So anyway, that was what was done at the time. Tanya Yeshua ben Uza Omer, Zan avadav v'shipchotav ha'kna'anim v'lo yazunu be'emto be'en tme'ah be'en Torah. So Yeshua ish Uza says, holds like the rabbis in our Mishnah, that you can't feed any other animals, but you can feed their Canaanite slaves. Again, even though I'm not allowed to benefit you, I can feed your slaves. Now, again, it's indirect benefit for you, so that's okay. But what about fattening them up, right? Like with the animals? Well, that's obviously a non-issue. My time, okay, we'll get back to this word nachaluta in a minute. The behemot, the whole idea is you want to fatten them up so that when they die, they'll be fatter and better for eating. Avadim ktanim, now this word lenachaluta is a weird use of a word. Nechira is usually used as a way you stab an animal rather than slaughter an animal. Now, it doesn't mean that these slaves were meant to be stabbed. That's definitely not what it means. It means that an animal that's stabbed, you don't eat because it's not kosher. So what they're saying is these are like animals that you stab and they're no longer edible anymore for Jews anyway. They're also, nothing's going to happen with their bodies. Their bodies aren't worth more when they die because they're fatter. And that's why you're not considered that you're benefiting their owner, because when they die, they just die and there's no value to their bodies after that. Whereas animals, now you're saying, obviously there isn't, but the point is they're comparing it to the animals, again, not to say slaves are like animals, but they're putting in the category of things that people own. One of them is slaves, and trying to view it in light of the animals and saying these are two totally different things. Okay, and with that, we'll finish. The new Mishnah will start tomorrow. We're going to get to a very interesting topic that's going to take us for a few days about visiting sick people. So really interesting, and you'll find, I found it, a very surprising, unexpected source for where we get the mitzvah of visiting the sick in the Torah. So you have something to look forward to for Shabbat. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.